Hello and welcome to a new episode of Africa Today. First, we're going to start with the Mozambique, as the rebels in there announced Tuesday a 2-month extension for the truce with the government, raising hopes for peace after the spike in violence last year that claims scores of lives. And let's know more about this in the following report.
Rebels in Mozambique announced on Tuesday a 2-month extension to a truce with the government, raising hopes for peace after a spike in violence last year that claimed scores of lives. The country's president said the truce by Afonso Dhlakama, leader of Renamo, which is both an armed insurgent group and an elected opposition party, showed that the two sides were beginning to rebuild confidence in each other. Worsening clashes between the Frelimo government and Renamo had revived the spectre of Mozambique's civil war that ended more than 20 years ago. But Dhlakama told reporters there have been some minor incidents, but the 7-day truce went well, so he announced the extension of the truce for 60 days until March 4. He said the truce is intended to build an atmosphere conducive to advancing talks in Maputo in peace and tranquility for both sides. Last year saw a sharp escalation in violence, and more than 15,000 people have been forced to flee to government-run camps, relatives' homes, or across the border to Malawi and Zimbabwe. The truce announcement came after tentative moves towards a peace process were suspended indefinitely last year due to setbacks, including the killing of a Renamo negotiator. President Filipe Nyusi said on Monday the truce was productive. The fighting has often focused on Mozambique's main roads, with Renamo attacking government convoys and civilian vehicles and soldiers accused of ruthlessly targeting suspected rebels in nearby villages.
And moving to Congo, where the opposition sides there has, in the crisis that has gripped the Congo, will this week hold their first talks on implementing a landmark deal on the country's political future. The deal was reached last Saturday, and we have more in the following report.
The government and opposition parties in the Democratic Republic of Congo on Saturday clinched a hard-won deal over President Joseph Kabila's fate, ending a political crisis that sparked months of deadly unrest. Under the term of the deal, Kabila will stay until the end of 2017, but a transition council will be established, headed by opposition leader Etienne Tshisekedi. In addition, a prime minister will be named from the opposition ranks. The talks were launched by the Roman Catholic Church to ward off violence as Kabila's second and final mandate ended on December 20th, with no sign of him stepping down and no election in sight. The final deal was signed after 13 hours of negotiations on Saturday, and only after several last-minute hitches nearly derailed an accord. According to a working document for the deal, Kabila guarantees that he will not seek a third mandate. In return, the opposition accepted the president remain in office until handing over to an elected successor. The Catholic Church, which plays a key role in the vast Central African country of some 70 million people, launched the negotiations on December 8 and had initially hoped to see a deal before Christmas. Voters in DR Congo were originally to have chosen a new president in 2016, but the authorities said the electoral registers must be revised, a huge enterprise in a country almost the size of Europe.
Welcome back, and our feature story today is about the land cocoa in Western Africa, the Ivory Coast. It was the 1960s and the 1970s that Ivory Coast began to establish itself as a powerhouse for cocoa. It now produces 40% of the world's cocoa. And cocoa makes up 15% of the country's GDP and 40% of its exports. And let's know more about this in the following report.
Ivory Coast, or Côte d'Ivoire, leads the world in production and export of the cocoa beans used in the manufacture of chocolate. Since 2012, Ivory Coast has been supplying 33% of cocoa produced in the world. West Africa collectively supplies 2/3 of the world's cocoa crop, with Ivory Coast leading production at 1.65 million tons and nearby Ghana, Nigeria, Cameroon and Togo producing additional 1.55 million tons. Ivory Coast overtook Ghana as leading producer of cocoa beans in 1978. The primary non-African competitor of Ivory Coast is Indonesia, which went from having almost non-existent domestic cocoa industry in the 1970s to becoming one of the largest producers in the market by the early 2000s. The crop itself, cocoa, is a shade-loving tree native to the understory of rainforests, growing at low elevation in the foothills of the Andes and the great South American equatorial river basins, the Amazon River Basin and the Orinoco River Basin. The tree is a choice crop for areas of West Africa with low to slight elevations, good soils, and the constant humidity of the tropics.